to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed, it is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is once again time for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. And today we've got a lovely, lovely guest. Someone I've been wanting to have on the show for quite some time. Mr. Martin Atkins. Martin Atkins of PiL, Pigface, Killing Joke. Geez, so many great acts, so much knowledge. We're going to be talking to Martin shortly. I'm going to play one of my favorite PiL songs first. We're just going to get right down to it. Real quick, thanks to everyone for sharing the episodes and all the recent love for the show. It's always appreciated. Sharing, subscribing, all that stuff. It's how people find out about it. And patreon.com/Protonic Reversal if you want to get the episode sooner. Okay, so we're going to play Flowers of Romance. We'll be back with Mr. Martin Atkins. Yeah. That's Flowers of Romance off of the Flowers of Romance record by one band known as Public Image Limited. And with us now, we have none other than Mr. Martin Atkins. Martin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. How you doing?
Very good. How was your... it seems like you're making very good use of your quarantine. You've had a lot of Zoom calls that are like living history situations and stuff like that.
Yeah, I started doing... what's his name? The drummer from Talking Heads, Chris Frantz, has a book coming out, and he had this post like 4 weeks ago, like, well, I'm canceling my whole book tour. That's that. I'm like, no, this is an opportunity. Just start doing Zooms and do 100 Zooms to 20 people, and then that's 2,000 people you just connected with. I'm like, oh shit, I should start doing the same thing. So
right, you're giving good advice that you should take yourself.
Yeah, it takes me a while, you know, and so I started doing events tied to the 40th anniversary of the first PiL tour. And this Saturday we're doing Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and then we'll do San Francisco, and then the 4 days in LA where we did American Bandstand and played to 10,000 people at the Olympic Auditorium. And I mean, that was fucking 1980.
Yeah.
So
and be clear, that's 1980, not 1918, but
send me like,
it's a ways back,
right,
to be sure.
And people send me tickets and little stories, and it's great. I'm putting everybody in the book. It's not just my book anymore. There's a name for it. I don't. Somebody sent me the name of what it is when you accumulate all of these memories from people, and I've forgotten that name, but that's what it is. So, so we're doing that.
Yeah,
we're also doing like workshops and stuff too.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because it was the PiL on American Bandstand appearance / moment that led you to being on this show. And it's a very roundabout way, because I was talking to my friend, Secret and Explicit, Dale Crover of the Melvins, and we were both talking about how that's like an iconic moment in punk rock where the weirdos got to like do something kind of cool at a greater level.
Connected. That's crazy. All right.
Yeah, and so that led to, you know, a butterfly flaps its wings in Indonesia, and then next thing you know, we're talking. And so Dale sends his best, by the way.
Oh, well, yeah, tell him I said hi too. But here's what I really love. So Dale, and who's the other guy in the Melvins?
Buzz Osborne.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, they love that album. So, and they're gonna write some piece. So on one side of the page there'll be this piece from the Melvins talking about the significance of blah blah blah, and then I stumbled across a DJ who used to work but holiday camp in Bognor Regis, England, and was fired for playing Flowers of Romance over the tannoy speakers in the morning. So it's just, there's
fantastic.
All of these little moments. Yeah. So, wow.
And that's a wild... go ahead, sorry.
No, I wondered how we got connected. That's cool as hell.
Yeah, it's just one. It's actually one of those things where like a fan like brought up the point that you're actually, not that difficult to get a hold of, and you should be on the show. And I was like, hey, you know what? I thought about that some time ago. I never followed up. Anyway, it's that part of it's not very interesting, other than the fact that it's just that this show is, very freeform, and it was funny to me that it's like, oh yeah, if we hadn't been talking about that American Bandstand appearance in like 1980, where you guys, have this like really transgressive thing. Johnny's running around the set and everyone's dancing, and then you guys both have your moment, like your moment where you get talked to, because Dick Clark comes over and realizes, oh, I got to talk to these guys too, and Wobble goes, what's your name? Wobble, the Jaw Wobble, which I always think is an amazing moment.
Well, the more amazing moment was in the dressing room.
Really?
When,
okay, tell me more.
Well, so Dick Clark comes in the dressing room like that. Oh, are you broadcasting video or?
We're experimenting with doing the video on Instagram Live. It's an experiment. I can if you're gonna make a rude gesture or something, I can turn it off.
Well, it was just like Dick Clark did this, and I showed you what he did, and I forgot if it's radio.
Yeah, it's largely
Dick
radio.
Clark,
so you're making like a head motion, yeah.
well, yeah. Dick Clark comes in the door, and like, you know, and if somebody could have said "ta-da," you know, he would have said "ta-da,"
right?
You know, and hey, and Wobble says, "I'm Joe Wobble. Who the hell are you?" So, I mean,
brilliant.
He had no idea. I tell people all the time, my recollection, we're on the ABC lot.
Okay.
And we're walking down the road with studios to the left and right. And American Bandstand was filmed in the studio next to the studio where they filmed a show called Soap, which was kind of a somewhat cultish comedy
I remember it very well. In fact, I watched it at the time, even though I didn't understand any of the jokes, but my dad thought it was hilarious, of course.
Right. And I remember, I think I actually said out loud, "Ooh, this is where they film Soap."
Right.
You know,
smart show.
We just
smart show.
We just thought it was just another TV show we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we didn't realize it was so, you know,
prestigious, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, okay, and that's, yeah, because American Bandstand, it's iconic for being, well, it's associated with rock and roll, basically. It's associated with all these different elements of rock and roll, but, you know, largely kind of came to American culture and the type of culture that it embodies, seen as, in a lot of ways, unfairly or not, as a more almost regressive thing, where it was celebrating rock and rolls and like, oh, remember when everything was cool in the 1950s? And so then to have a band like Public Image Limited on, it's pretty awesome, because it's not, certainly not your normal American Bandstand booking, I would imagine.
And they got very upset. They got very, very upset. Dick Clark was furious. He felt that we had trampled on everything that he built, you know, and a bunch of people surrounding him were like, "Dude, no, this is great. Let this moment happen." And then I think he grew to either like the moment or appreciate the notoriety. Not that he needed any notoriety. But
right. But like the sensationalism almost of it, like the fact that it's like, oh, this is going to be something that gets people talking, you know, whatever.
Yeah. And for you know, up until a few years ago, there would be like all-time best American Bandstand that they'd show on British TV. Mm-hmm. Here's this crazy American show. And my mom and dad and my mom would call me up and be like, "Oh, you were on the TV again last night, American Bandstand." Like, oh.
Awesome. So
someone would, you know, the postman would come and she'd be like, "Oh, hold on a minute, come on, watch this videotape of my son on TV."
That's all. And how old were you at that time? That was 1980, right? So
21. Was born in 59.
Wow. And obviously and if you don't mind, you know, we already started there, but let's talk about how PiL kind of came in front loaded in the both a good and bad way, just because of Johnny's reputation, because of, you know, Sex Pistols being so iconic and, you know, genre defined in their own way, and PiL being a completely different beast. And
right.
It seemed like, and you have to understand this is for the younger listeners, this is an era before social media. Things didn't move as fast as it does now. Information wasn't always immediately readily available. I remember
we used to read papers, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, I remember when I got the Flowers of Romance record, and at first I was really confused, because I was like, this is not what I expected at all. But then as I listened to it, I was like, oh, but this is really cool. Like, I like that. And then it's something where I probably, no, full on, I got the record because I was a Sex Pistols fan. Flat out. And that's it. And like, I was super surprised by something incredibly interesting that sounded nothing like that, and was very, you know, to this day, hard pressed to think of an album that sounds anything like Flowers of Romance.
Well, there's it was certainly interesting. I mean, it was strange because John changed his name from Rotten back to Lydon.
Right.
If a poor interviewer would sit down with pad and pencil. Now, I wanted to ask you about the Sex Pistols. No, get out, fuck off.
Right.
So, but if it hadn't been for the Pistols, we wouldn't have played to 3,000 people in New York 40 years ago, or 10,000 people in Los Angeles. And it's kind of an interesting use of notoriety. I think lots of people say, "Oh, John had a vision in the studio." He actually didn't. Most of the songs on Flowers that I worked on were fully formed by myself and Nick Launay before John heard them or sang a word. He didn't coach us in the studio. He'd show up at night, and me and Nick would work all day, and he would miraculously sing over this crazy shit we made. But
yeah, it's pretty wild. So,
but what he did was he allowed, and that's not the right word, but he enabled. That's a better word. Mm-hmm. He enabled us to do that. He enabled the Metal Box to happen, which was one song, and that was my audition. And he allowed his notoriety to gain the leverage with the label. For any other band had delivered Flowers of Romance or Fodder Stomp or some of the songs on the first release, they were really being dropped from the label. Yeah. And it was only 4 albums in, This Is What You Want, This Is What You Get. I mean, This Is Not a Love Song was a worldwide hit.
Right.
But the everything was a battle of us wanting to do what we wanted to do differently, not rehearsing before we went in the studio, not rehearsing before we walked on stage, which is something we carried to Pigface. Yeah, I mean, so my first show was Boston, April the 18th, 1980.
Okay.
Before that, I played one song on the Metal Box. Then we did the John PiL show, 3 songs. Then we did Paris, 2 shows in Paris, Old Grey Whistle Test, Pop Tones and Careering. So 2 gigs, a radio show and a TV show, and that was it. We were on stage in Boston, and the next night is New York. So, yeah, we didn't rehearse. Yeah.
I mean, that's did that just seem normal to you at the time, or was that something that gave you any anxiety?
No, I mean, I just didn't care because I started playing when I was 9. So
right, sure. Because you started at a very young age. Yeah, of course, yeah.
So by the time I get to 19, 20, I was playing 8 shows a week. 7 nights, Sunday afternoons, we'd do music for strippers in the northeast of England at the working men's clubs. Brilliant. So I was doing 8 gigs a week when I was 12, 13, 14. I was really good at the age of 20, and I didn't need to rehearse. The songs were simple. John would just kind of, sometimes he'd wait 63 bars before coming in. Sometimes he'd just come in after 8 bars. Right. Sometimes Keith would go off stage to get well, we could say. Sometimes there will be some interaction with the audience or the equipment, or people stealing equipment or grabbing John or trying to stab John, that would, suddenly the songs are 4 minutes longer,
Because there's this obstacle to overcome, sometimes maybe physically threatening even.
Well, we weren't physically threatened. That's a weird thing. We're playing to thousands of people, and that in 1980, anything to do with rock and roll was bad. So somebody would say, is there a set list? And it would be like, how dare you, set list? Where's the security? How dare you, security? Are there any T-shirts for sale? How dare,
Right,
oh, come on. We could use some security, and I wouldn't have minded making a few dollars off some T-shirts. I did that first tour in 1980 for £60 a week.
I was way too young to be there. But what I imagined it was like, oh no, that's what Foghat does, or something along like the mindset being somewhere along there, right?
Right. I mean, just what are the lights going to be tonight? There's no lights.
Right.
Turn every light on. Like, people were just losing their minds.
Yeah.
And people who are good at their craft, like give the sound guy a set list. Say, look, we might switch these 3 songs at the end, but this will give you an idea.
Yeah.
I realize now they could have done their job more and enhanced what we were doing. Instead,
worked with you rather than worked with you rather than just being left out of the process entirely. And
right.
So, so would you say that had to be an interesting time as far as just learning lots of different things in regards to touring and to being in a band, but for a band that just, as its modus operandi was convention defying, not just musically, but in every way. Did you find it was often working at cross purposes like that?
Yeah, a lot. Plus, there were substances and just stuff that as I've gone through my diaries and spoken to people. Sorry, the dog just got out. Spoken to people about their experiences at concerts. I don't know what I was thinking on that first tour. 4 shows in, it was obvious it wasn't going to last very long. We only did 10 shows, and Wobble left. Wobble left the band after that. So, it was doomed before it started in many ways. And I think that I have this. I enjoy writing. And so when I'm doing my reflections on PiL presentation, I'm like, all right, so what if PiL was a lasagna, right? I'm like, okay, what's inside the lasagna? And Keith Levine would say, glass, broken glass. Like, oh, broken glass. All right.
Fair.
But it's pasta, right? No, it's roofing tiles. It's asphalt and roofing. Okay, but is there Parmesan cheese on the top? No, there's no Parmesan cheese. It's more broken glass and sand. Like, okay, so then it's like, what? Can we taste it? No, you can't taste it. You'll end up in the emergency room.
Right.
I'm going to do something. Let me just do something with the dog. Hold
sure,
on.
absolutely. Once again, for those just joining us, we're talking to Mr. Martin Atkins. Thanks for folks joining us on the Instagram Live. This is a brand new experiment, so appreciate you if you were coming in that way. Everyone else on Radio Nope, always glad to have everyone listeners on Radio Nope, and we're back again with Mr. Martin Atkins.
Sorry about that. So you end up with this insane lasagna that has to be different at every single level.
Right.
It's like, all right, so then can we taste it in a restaurant? You can't go to a restaurant. You have to be in an emergency room. It's so dangerous. All right, can we read about it in a culinary magazine? No, because it's not even food. It's like, okay, it's so different that it could have just been really different and existed in that space.
Right.
And actually been more. It's like, early Pigface was just, here's an 11-minute long song, fuck off, And,
sure.
And we wouldn't rehearse, but the fact is, when we did rehearse and we iron out the technical kinks because we were using triggers and electronics and some loops, we were better. When we allowed the songs and arrangements to be friendlier, I found we could present harder, more challenging ideas. Mm-hmm. So if you have a challenging idea, 13 minutes long, and it's whatever, it just pushes people away. To me, the craftier trick, the more dangerous trick, is to put a commercial sheen on top of some very difficult musical subject matter. And then against their will almost, people are singing difficult, challenging songs in the shower because you've strategized that. To me, that's way more subversive than just being so obnoxious that people run.
Well, yeah. So when I spoke to Jerry Casale from Devo, we were talking about how, some of those Devo songs were so subversive lyrically, but they sound happy or dancey. And it's like, oh, it's about this incredible, like, depressing subject matter that if you actually stop and think about it, it's like, oh no, that's a song about, critical thinking or like whatever. And it's like I likened it to, well, since you had your dog on earlier, I'll use this analogy. When you want you to give a pill to a dog, you put it like some cheese around it and then give it to the dog.
Right. Exactly. So I think that.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say. So do you feel that with PiL so the wrong parts of the process were made difficult, just as like a kind of like a exercise of, I don't know, statement of intent or something?
No, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think that I look at that first American tour, and it would be easy for me to say I questioned the organization strategy for
right.
But I actually did, because I got there's an interview on San Francisco radio before the last show, and I had my own single under the name of Brian Brain come out in the UK the month before, and it was in the alternative charts in the UK. And I told the radio presenter before we started the interview, ask me halfway through why I do Brian Brain. I'm like, okay. And like halfway through, he asked, why do you do Brian Brain? I said, well, I wanted to do one thing in my life, Steve, that was not a disorganized, mismanaged pile of shit. And I ended up rolling on the floor in a fist fight with John, and I got fired as soon as I got home. But clearly for me then, I had an organizational brain.
Right.
And I think my strategy now would have been to say, look, we've done 10 shows in 30 days. Everybody had hotel suites. If we did a show every night, if Keith didn't need to be well all the time and find a dealer, if we could deal with some of these problems, if we did 30 shows to 3,000 people a night, and we didn't spend all the money that we made having 2 days off in between each show and flying everywhere. Like, if you're going to have 2 days between each show, if you're going to have 2 days between Cleveland and Chicago, fucking drive.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, why? It's a very inefficient way of working. Well, and it's definitely different than like the model, what's the Mike Watt saying? If you're not playing, you're paying.
Well, that's great. But we could have created our own leverage and our own independence, and maybe had our own label. I started my label in '88, Invisible Records.
Right.
PiL could have started this, but to see John complaining in 2005, we can't get a deal. The business is fucked. No one will sign us. I'm like, oh, this is embarrassing. Start a label, you king of punk.
Yeah, it's not like the records are gonna sell. Like you can make it sustainable.
Right, exactly. And but if I hadn't heard that radio interview, I wouldn't have believed myself that I was so outspoken about the business side. And instead of then having to use John's leverage and his persona to have Virgin Records allow us to make the Flowers of Romance, which they hated, or any
right. They only weren't it for the to capitalize on this, what they consider the zeitgeist.
Right. We could have earned our own independence instead of relying on John for our independence. If that makes sense.
Well, it does, and it's interesting to me that you would so quickly, even at a relatively young age, fall into the bringing order out of chaos mindset, which seems to follow through on with all your work, not just all your bands, but all your work with the talks, with the book. one thing that struck me with that is the focus on the journey as well as the goal, meaning that doing things as a band to make something sustainable, meaning not getting caught up in the ego trip of things, quit your day job before that's a good time to do it, marshaling resources, things like that. It came from a very informed place and not in a way that most people talk about that I found.
Well, I want to dispute something you said, like bringing order out of chaos. Maybe I do, but then, this last Pigface tour in 2019, I used my organizational skills to have 5 drummers.
Right.
The last Bradley Bills from Chant and Danny Carey from Tool, and 5 other people playing drums and 3 bass players, Andrew Weiss from Rollins, Greta Brinkman from Moby, Charles Levi from Thrillkill. I mean, you can use your organizational skills to gouge the room to pour gasoline on the chaos, right? But if it's just chaos, it could just go anywhere. So by organizing something, it allows me to then, throw other stuff into it. Like, so the last show we did in Chicago, I even forgot I invited 4 rappers to jump on stage with us and just jam.
Okay, right, sure.
So Dirk, I think Leslie Rankin's like, who are these people in the dressing room? I'm like, oh shit, they're gonna sing your song with you, Leslie.
Right. And she wasn't even aware that was happening.
No, and I'd forgotten, but it would surprise me, and it was glorious and delightful, So, but once you do something crazy like that, that becomes your ceiling. The ceiling becomes your floor, and so if 25 years ago I tried to put a 17-member version of Pigface together, it would have destroyed me, But you do a 7, 8, 9-member band 25, 30 years ago, and it's like, oh, shit, that was kind of crazy. But I look at pictures of Pigface back then now, and the stage seems deserted. Like, what's happened?
Compared to the compared to the groups that you have as a later concern, it probably seems like the equivalent of like a power trio by comparison. And also, I mean, it's important to note too, and I don't need to tell you this because you already know, but multiple drummers is difficult at the best of times, and to have that many. I mean, the only band I can think of that's pulled off something like that remotely close is maybe Latter-day King Crimson, and it's not. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's difficult to pull off, and I'd be interested to know how you orchestrated that, or to use your term, organized.
That's a really interesting thing. So double drummers fascinated me. Gary Glitter, the Glitter Band, was 2 drummers as a big pop act. Cozy Powell, I think, had a secondary drummer for his Dance with the Devil hit that he had in the 70s. So felt like something interesting to do, and Al had me and Bill do that with Ministry in 91.
Yeah, that's right.
91. And so it's like, okay. And that was the beginning of Pigface. And then when I started Murder Inc., I called up Big Paul Ferguson from Killing Joke. And I just thought it would be just interesting psychologically to work with him, because I loved his beats. I had to learn all of his beats to do the old songs with Killing Joke. And that changed my drumming. But then to be in a band with him, and it was really interesting. Like, it was like we played tit for tat for a while. Okay, well, here's this. Okay, well, all right, But then after about half an hour, I just started playing boom, bah, boom, bah. It was kind of like we got it out of our system and we just synchronized. So, I mean, if you're not trying to prove anything,
Right.
and you listen, so I'm listening to Danny or I'm listening to Bradley or any of the other drummers that have been out with us, then it just encourages, and the rest of the band don't know, how long is this song? Is it 5 minutes or 11 minutes? Let's find out, oh my goodness, there's bagpipes. Look out,
Right.
then it avoids that worst possible situation of a well-rehearsed band with the same set list every night, because that's good for the sound guy and the lighting guy. And this is where I go back to agreeing with early PiL for a bit. Then everybody on stage they're just punching a clock, And I've been on stage and I thought, oh, if we do an encore, I'm going to miss Basic Instinct on cable, or
Right. I'm thinking about my laundry mindset. Yeah.
room service only goes till 11:30. What the fuck? Come on, Cleveland, we got to get out of here, and so I think a lot of this chaos and things changing is just my desire to have everybody, when everybody's on stage, focused on the audience, but with their radar on and listening to each other, then that's a really great thing. It's a really great thing.
It is, and I'm curious. I'm curious to know also. You mentioned Killing Joke, and you mentioned, and that led me to think about. You kind of came in at a very interesting time with Killing Joke. It was somewhat. It was an interesting time for the band. What was that experience like? Because you're coming in. It's obviously a different scenario than what you've been used to at the time. What can you kind of paint that picture of what that looked like?
Well, at that point, I'd just done PiL. I left PiL Christmas, New Year's '85, and I just gave up on the music business. I think I did my Brian Brain thing,
Right.
But it wasn't until '88, '89, Geordie called me up, said, somebody just gave me a phone number, come to London and join Killing Joke. But it was like, I'm like, oh, okay, Killing Joke, War Dance, Love Like Blood, Change, 80s. Oh, fuck yeah, this is going to be great. I had a few days of like, oh, fuck yeah. And then somebody said, have you heard Outside the Gate? I'm like, no, what's that? It's their last album. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, right. I nearly did that on the plane. I'm just like, what has happened? And I said to somebody, I'm like, listen, this is a band. I'm not joining this band. I'm not in that band.
Right.
Like, I don't know what it's going to be like with me in it, but it's not going to be like this fucking 20 tracks of people.
Sure. No, it matters. It's like, what's the saying? If you can't fly with eagles if you're riding with turkeys.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, but that was a really interesting point. I just married my first wife, and my immigration status hadn't been cross-checked by Scotland Yard.
Okay.
And so if something had happened and my immigration hadn't been approved, I would have been stuck in the UK for maybe 3 years. And so it wasn't just some kind of, hey, let's see what happens. It's like a really big thing to get on that plane,
Yeah.
And
it's a commitment.
Huh?
And it's a commitment too. You're going down a path.
Yeah. And so, and it wasn't easy. It was a war of wills at some points. There's a song, I don't know if you're familiar with the Extremities album, but there's a song on there called Age of Greed. Mm-hmm. And Jazz came in with these lyrics, and it was like, basically he was upset because traveling first class wasn't all it was cracked up to be.
Right. Yeah. which is the equivalent of the Bob Seger turned the page touring his hard song, right?
And I'm like, well, who's the intended audience for this, Jazz?
Right.
Fuck, man. Look, we got like homeless, crusty kids in England. They were called, hitchhiking to the gig. You can't stand on stage going, first class. Like, you're not going to have a bunch of people go, he's right. First class is shite.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're not going to get a crowd chant of that going. Right.
Right. And so I still have, and we used to have pots of tea, like every hour we'd stop rehearsal, and I still have the lyrics, and I can see Geordie's how everybody was just writing lyrics, feather the nest and fuck the rest. It became this kind of sarcastic commentary on the wealthy. Right. But that's what it was like. When we did the demos for Money Is Not Our God, we did those with Albini on the tape machine I now have. Geordie just played distorted bass. It's the most distorted. It was just, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah, very rude bass sound, very gnarly.
It was like, bah, bah, bah. It was like Money Is Not Our God. And Jazz is like, yeah, okay, I've got a song. It's called Everybody Feels Pain Sometimes. Well, they fucking don't, mate. I mean, this is not happening. It was like Gilbert O'Sullivan on the piano.
Right.
And but that was just it. It was like, just
it didn't
could
fit.
not.
Yeah.
Right. And we just could not let the guard down. And that was so good. One of the things I did do was I started to manage the band. Was I'm like, we've got to get to America. People love you in America. But I had 3 favorite songs I used to listen to, and I didn't know they were Killing Joke. So I'm like, that's me. There's got to be lots of people around America who are listening to your songs on the dance floor. We've got to go over there and educate them. And they're like, no, fuck it. In the end, I got them to tour the States because I told them about the Miyako Hotel in San Francisco that had sushi on room service and Japanese bathtubs that were neck deep. It's like, all right, let's go to a, but at least we were getting in front of audiences and able to try some things out and reinforce the direction to go in. And that ended up with the Extremities album. That meeting, I was living in Chicago, so there's a kind of an industrial music overspill.
Definitely, yeah.
So we got there in the end, yeah.
And all right, and that's the wildly different experience from PiL. It's a very different set of needs and concerns, and it's a very different set of tools within the toolkit that are required for that. So knowing full well that a band is more than just songs and playing, it's a group of personalities. What do you feel like you learned the most with your time in Killing Joke?
Interesting. Well, I started a partnership with Paul Raven, the bass player. He came into Pigface, live Pigface. He didn't play on the first album, but he came out on tour with us, and then he was involved in Murder Inc. I reinforced the value of a rhythm section, which I don't know that really happens anymore. I don't think people understand what rhythm sections are, really. So that I think I also learned, and this took a while, that you have somebody like Paul Raven or Geordie or William Tucker in Ministry and Pigface, people that sometimes it's difficult with these pirates. Having pirates in a band can create problems in an organization, financially, legally, in all different kinds of ways. But that's a price you pay for being surrounded by charismatic, different individuals that if it wasn't for music, we'd all be in jail.
Right.
You know? And
yeah, totally.
so I think initially some of this stuff was burdensome, but now it's like, for me, it's like the cost of being interested. I think I see what John has done with PiL now, and I understand it. He's employing some talented musicians. None of them are going to say to John, what the fuck? You know, because you don't say that to your employer, you know? And so I guess he decided to trade ease of use for truth, you know? So I learned about that, and that's still continuing. And as I look back and start to write my, what you call my memoirs, along with the people behind me,
right.
I'm starting to kind of really harvest the lessons from this as I look back on it, with a bunch of people helping me to do that.
Well, yeah, and especially with the, you mentioned with the retrospection, like going back and revisiting some of these old times and things along those lines, and you're coming at it as you are now, and with wisdom, and coming at it from a very different position than you were when you were, say, on American Bandstand at 21 or whatever.
Well, it's different when you're in it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, all of these bands I've been in share a kind of outside of the normal edginess.
Right.
A rebelliousness, a don't give a fuckness that's quite unusual these days. I think I see people being so strategic and understanding the business and playing a very careful game. Okay. And it's delightful to realize that the careful game will never get you anywhere, you know?
Yeah, if you are, it seems like if you're not willing to take some risks and take some big swings, then you're just going to move yourself right along the line towards background music, and not really, and for some people, it's not in their nature to take risks, I suppose. But it does surprise me when people that are in a position of privilege tend to do the safe thing, because that's when you should be doing the crazy thing, multiple tubas and bagpipes. Let's go.
That's why that's the respect I have for John, is that he allowed us to do that back then, and he was offered a chance to start to curate a reggae label for Virgin Records, and right. He could have just done that and smoked and had a can of Red Stripe and gone backwards and forwards to Jamaica, he chose not to do that.
Real quick with this back with PiL, After Flowers Romance is the this is what you want, this is what you get. There's a thing with Keith, the Commercial Zone. It's a kind of a muddled story. Like I've heard multiple versions. Can you give your accounting of what all happened there? Because this is before you left PiL, of course. So I just to set the timeline, because we're jumping around here.
Right. I have the cassette backups for 17 rolls of 2-inch tape from the New York period. Mm-hmm. The myth that emerged was Commercial Zone was Keith's version of PiL and what he did with the album. And this is what you want, this is what you get, is what John and I did. The only problem with that is I think there are 2 songs on Keith's version of the album, Commercial Zone, that he didn't know they existed until he stole the tapes from the studio. So it was just, that was where we were in this process. Right. We were in hindsight, playing drums to Mickey Mouse watches, finding rhythms in loops inside of mechanical watches. It was pre-industrial, really.
Right.
We carried that on. There's a song on Commercial Zone called Miller High Life, where Bob Miller, who was our engineer producer in New York, we'd started to feed the drums through a synthesizer. And like we were allowed the luxury of fucking around with all kinds of stuff. And, Keith released that as his own. He didn't even know it existed. He wasn't even in the studio when we did that. So that's...
But it's his version, so...
Right, but here's the wonderful thing about being 60 years old is and I would just pose this question. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot. I put out 350 albums through my label. I taught myself to engineer and produce and started my own studio, which I still have to this day. And I write books and do spoken word, and Wobble does this stuff. And Jeanette Lee is now a co-director of Rough Trade in the UK. And if Keith was the creative genius behind all of this, I think he put out an EP in the last 40 years. Right.
The body of work stands for itself, right?
Well, there isn't a body of work to fucking...
The lack of body of work, yeah. That's where I was going with it, yeah.
There isn't a body of work to balance out a wobbly table at a cappuccino bar, So there's that, and at the time, Keith was one of my favorite guitarists in the world, and I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing guitarists, and bass players and singers and everything. And I was just like, I guess I just didn't want to say anything, because by tarnishing Keith, I was tarnishing PiL or whatever. But now I see an interview where John or Keith are claiming to have played the drums on The Flowers of Romance or playing along with me. It's just like, fuck off. That's just me playing triplets,
Right.
Fuck off, So I don't. My book isn't me telling Keith to fuck off. In fact, I spent 3 hours interviewing him because he wasn't in the Public Images Rotten documentary, and I thought he should have been. So I interviewed him for my book. So yeah, I don't want to go down a road of calling Keith names.
Oh, certainly not. Certainly not. I'm glad you cleared that up from your perspective as what that went. Because again, harkening back to what I said earlier, now it's hard to describe for younger folks who listen to the show that there would just be years of like, what happened there? Were they in some kind of fight? Like what? How does that care?
And so I've got stuff in my diary, and I've accidentally interviewed people like a week ago. Like, oh yeah, I was on stage in New York, and Keith left. He had to go to the Mud Club to get a fix. I'm like, and that was 1980. And so to have Keith be like, PiL was stolen from me in its prime, it's like, you fucking shat on it yourself, you junkie fuck. Wow, see what I did there?
Making news here with Martin Atkins. Well, but it's from an outside perspective, if you can read the signs and if you understand what that kind of behavior looks like, that's what it looked like from the outside. So to me,
yeah. And now, if when I encounter that again, I'm sure it's like, oh, I wonder where this is headed. You know exactly where it's headed.
Right. So after PiL, you had Brian Rain. Whenabouts do you start coming up with what's in Pigface? Is that when you're playing with Ministry?
Yeah, it's on the Mind is a Terrible Thing tour. Bill Rieflin and I had to go a distance away from everybody else because one drummer warming up on a practice pad is annoying. Two drummers on two practice pads is beyond tolerance. It's beyond human tolerance. And so we just started talking, and I'm like, this is a great fucking crazy band. Why don't we just do something else? Because that live band, like Ogre, Tucker on guitar, whoever else, Mike Scasher, I think, that wasn't the band that put the album before, The Mind's a Terrible Thing, didn't put that album together. Like, we should do something. And so we decided to do something. I asked Al as a courtesy, because Al had actually put the band together, and we decided the day after that tour ended to go in the studio because there wasn't the budget to have everybody go home and fly back. We wanted to so the day after the tour ended, we went to Chicago Tracks Recording with Steve Albini and invited the guys from KMFDM to come in. NS came in, and David Yao was in town with the Jesus Lizard.
That's right. I forgot he was on that first record. Yeah. Forgot all about that.
I worked with him, so I knew him. And we asked Steve Albini to produce, and he ended up playing guitar. And that was that. And I think that would have been it. But we sold 12,000 albums in the first week, 79,000 in the first year. I'm like, oh, we should do this, and we didn't rehearse. We just went out and did it. And I think decided at the end, wow, this could be really good if we actually had some technical rehearsals. Mm-hmm. And that's what we decided to do. Bill Rieflin decided he didn't want to carry on doing it. So I said, well, with your permission, I'd like to just keep on doing it. I'm loving this. So we did.
So the response is good. People are connecting with it. And it's again, it almost seems like it's filling a void for something that didn't exactly exist before, but kind of slotted in very nicely. And then you're turning it into a different entity, into an entity that's like a sustainable entity that's not like a one-time thing. It's going to be something that happens again, that ultimately turns into it being like a kind of a mini universe that you created that exists like within your mind and your plans. So can you walk us through the path of doing that? I mean, there's so many people involved, very talented folks. Where do you start with something like that?
Well, so the easiest way to start, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of pseudo jazz, musical, whatever, arty terms, but I would just describe it as a bar or a coffee shop. Like, so, somebody might meet someone and go, hey, let's go have a drink at the pub or wherever. And I would just say, hey, you're kind of interesting. Do you feel like doing this Pigface thing? And some people did, and some people were like, some people would just do one show. But once the flexibility was established, then it became a yardstick. Like, so Curse Mackey from the Evil Mothers, I met those guys in San Antonio, and Curse comes up to me at the venue. He's like, oh yeah, I hear your shtick. Anybody can be in Pigface, blah, blah, there's no bound.
Right.
Well, not a shtick, actually. It's that's what it is. It's like, oh, yeah. So, like, my band's next door, and we could just jump on stage. I'm like, well, what do you do? It's like, well, we have like 5 oil drums, and we set them on fire. I'm like, okay, get them on stage now. So
let's do it. Yeah.
So, and then it's like, wow, what's that sound? Oh, someone's playing bagpipes next door. It's a fire station. All right. So I just go and knock on the door because it's like, how much more industrial could we be? Like, there's Ogre on vocals with Chris Connolly, and we just done the Ministry thing, and I was in Killing Joke, and, to start a show with 6 guys in full regalia playing bagpipes was the most
it's a little unorthodox, yeah.
But then it's like, then some bands would be like, okay, it's bagpipe time, Well, we would always do that in Seattle and Philadelphia. But then I was at a laundromat in Cincinnati called Sudsy Malone's.
I know it well. Yes.
Oh, okay. And here's this band called Roundhead, and this girl's playing cello, and I'm like, hey, I've loved cello ever since the Flowers of Romance, and actually probably since the Beatles days, and I've got this band called Pigface, and now this sounds like I'm trying to pick you up, but I'm not. I'd love you
right, in a different sense, yeah.
jump on the bus and come and play cello with us. And the next morning, one of the crew guys says, there's a fucking girl here with fucking cello. What the fuck? I'm like, oh yeah, she's playing cello on the tour. And I mean, she was Barbara was, she then joined the Seattle Symphony Orchestra after, I forget what band she was with, Afghan Wigs. And then, now she's with the Seattle Symphony Orchestra, I think. But she was going to join us on this leg in early June, which of course isn't happening now. And then sitars and the belly dancers and a guy in the Carolinas who, like, people went nuts. It's like he wanted to get in for free, and we're like, well, what can you do? He's like, well, I have a shopping cart, and it's covered in guitar pickups and Christmas tree lights. We're like, oh, fucking hell. How much more industrial could you get? You know?
Right, that's like peak industrial, yeah.
Halfway through the show, which is some open air place, he wheels out the shopping cart, and everybody's like, oh, this is going to be we'll never forget this moment of industrial, bliss. And it was the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, just... It's like he had 3 different pickups. They were just all bad. It sounded like somebody smashing a coffee tray on their head,
Well, and that's always the danger, right? What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work?
Did.
Yeah.
But there's the sound, and then there's the spectacle. And once people are running the sound in their heads anyway, which they do, then it's all about the spectacle, right? So then we start putting screens in front of the show, which is reminiscent of PiL at the Ritz, playing behind a screen. And so there's anticipation, and people can't map out the show in their heads. Like if you see 3 bass rigs, you're going to be like, uh-oh, there's 3 bass rigs, therefore Andrew Weiss is here. He's going to do this. And people, right? But when we put screens in front of everything, and the idea was just to hide all the equipment, but then we started to do the first 1 or 2 songs behind the screens, and people were just starting to fuck around with everything. And then because once you establish methods of working, like don't treat your crew like shit.
What a wild concept.
Then I can say to my sound guy, hey, 9 drum kits tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, what?
Right.
Just put stereo pairs overhead. It's going to be fine, And then the lighting guy's freaking out until you put a scrim up, and it's like 2 kits, then a 3rd kit, and the scrim comes down, and there's 5 more kits behind him, and it's like, who cares what it sounds like at that point? I mean, it honestly just doesn't matter. It's the experience, And then, like, who from the audience wants to play my drum kit? Like, right. Not a stunt kit off to the side, but like, fuck, sit down and play my drums. I'm going to go and get a drink at the bar. Or,
sure, yeah.
Play pool with my girlfriend, watching the show, and applauded as the band came off. I mean, so once you remove yourself from that idea of like, ooh, they didn't play that song very well, it didn't go like the album. Like, which album? Bob Dog, our guitarist, used to play with the Evil Mothers. He's become like a Pigface archivist. He'll say that before we do this song, which version are we doing? He said, because there's 4 very different versions.
You want to make sure he's doing the right one, yeah.
It changed over time, and it mutated, and it became this other thing, and this other cool stuff was lost. I'm like, well, put it back in, and we'll just, we'll find re-inspiration in older stuff, but then we'll also allow people, like, I remember Jim Thirlwell from Fetus is like, well, how does this song go? I'm like, I don't know how it goes with you, Jim.
Right, yeah.
And, and he ran on stage, sang 2 verses in double time, fell off the front of the stage and knocked himself unconscious, and we didn't see him for like, it was a really long show. We didn't see him for like 3 hours. And
I mean, that's terrible, but it's also hilarious.
Right. Genesis P. Orridge came on stage in San Francisco, with 6 cassette tape machines, and he didn't ask how long is this song.
Right.
He just completely, his presence with 6 tape machines and his attitude totally changed what we were doing. And that sounds like a surprising thing, but shouldn't that absolutely be the case? Here's Pigface, and it's like this. Pigface with Genesis P. Orridge, and Genesis P. Orridge 1993 was a different art force than she was at the end.
Certainly, yeah.
Almost mythical status, and just it's complete. Of course, it's completely different with him. It would be disrespectful for it not to be. Right. So then, then you just let that stuff happen, and it becomes, Laurie Barbero was at the Minneapolis show. I'm like, oh, you got any sticks?
Who I just had on the show about a week and a half ago, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just me, Danny Carey, and Brad, and probably 5 other people playing drums, and it's like, oh, fuck. And it just became it's a social thing, is what it is.
So lots of awesome stories there. Talk to me about with the idea of the, like keeping the curtain up. Was any part of that in response to there being a focus on the personalities, like, oh, so-and-so is going to be in the band this time, cool. And like wanting to like see that rather than taking in the group as the whole. Cause to me, it almost seemed, again, from an outsider, this coming out from a resident's perspective or something, where the idea would be like, you would be forced to focus on the music because you couldn't gaze upon the perceived person.
So it was just for the beginning of the show. I mean,
right.
I get your point, but honestly, I don't know that Pigface music is good enough to have people like, no, forget that Trent is on stage. Think about I mean, I'm a marketer, but it's weird that like people are like, well, is there anybody of the caliber of Trent going to be performing? It's like, well, Trent wasn't the caliber of Trent when he performed with us. I mean,
sure, yeah, no, I get you, yeah.
I met him in Cleveland when he was playing trumpet 5 years before. But, I mean, he'd sold 5,000 albums when he was on the first Pigface album, and nobody got a release for him to perform with them after Pigface. I thought we were doing TVT a favor, actually, when he performed with Pigface back then. So it's like when people get all snotty about the caliber, it's like, well, you would have turned your nose up if I told you Trent was performing. Trent who? Where's he from? In fact, Steve Albini said to me, listen, Martin, you're flying this guy out from Cleveland. We could save that $150 flight. I've got a friend here in Chicago who could play keyboards. I'm like, he's not actually coming out here to play keyboard. I think he's going to sing on a song. I mean, fucking hell.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole idea of who's famous and why and who isn't and why is insane anyway.
Well, and it almost seems like the modus operandi with Pigface is at least a small tacit abandonment of ego for the process of being part of this greater whole. Anyway.
Right. And that's absolutely part of it. Like, people get used to like, okay, for the last 10 shows, I've been doing this. I do this move, and I'm like, and I jump, and the boom, and the lighting. That's fantastic. And there's 1,200 people coming to see us tonight, but I've invited 4 rappers to come and fumble their way through a different version of your song,
Yeah, mind the bagpipe player when you're doing your move.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, somebody's turning to me for a cue, and I've given my drumsticks to my.
There's like some random dude playing, yeah.
Person, but it's like, just as I was saying before, like John used everything about what he was doing in 1978, 79 to enable PiL to exist in the way he saw it. Just as Trent used everything about what he was doing to release that was it his second single, I Want to Fuck You Like an Animal. If Fuck You Like an Animal was his first single, radio would have said, yeah, we're not fucking playing this. But he used everything, used all of his leverage to become the guy like, oh my God, he's that crazy bastard saying fuck. But he couldn't have gotten away with it as a first single. And similarly, if you're not doing everything you can and exploring everything, then you're just being a librarian. So it obviously doesn't matter to me if the drumming at a certain point of a show is appalling and out of time. It's like, it's not going to ruin my career. You know, it's not even.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get where you're going with it. Yeah. Yeah. It's
like, oh, well, whoa, that was kind of crazy. I might have to run on stage with a trash can lid and start banging some stuff or jump up on the kit to help somebody out. But it's like, once you let go of stuff, there's no danger.
No, and I think that's an important point, and it's interesting. It's interesting they mentioned that too, because it kind of seems like with the way Pigface runs that it'll never not, it's never going to be boring. It's never going to be routine.
Right. And so
it's nature.
So and I guess then this goes to like my needs, right? If I'm going to have Dirk, Randy Blythe, Leslie Rankin, Mary Butler, Charles Levi, Andrew Weiss, Greta, Bob Dog, Enesh, Bradley, Kurst Mackey. If I'm going to have all these people on stage, I don't want them half asleep. I want 120% of them.
Yeah.
And I get that when it's like, we're playing this tiny place tonight, or like Danny Carey's here, just to the tingle that went around the tour when Danny said, like, hey, I can't do Thanksgiving. I've got to go be with the family. I'm like, oh, here we go. So I can only do Minneapolis and Chicago. When I told everybody on the bus, Danny Carey's doing Minneapolis, Chicago, my drum techs went fucking bananas. It was like, oh, fuck. I felt like saying, oh, sure. Never mind taking care of me, which I actually.
Oh yeah, Danny Carey. Suddenly you're at attention. Yeah.
So there's like 4 days of like kit maintenance and like.
Right.
The drums are ready for Danny. I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, I'm like cut myself on a mirror ball. but it's like everybody's delivering their A game, and that's why I like to keep it changing,
Well, and it seems like even if it's an ever-changing one, you have a vision for it, which I think is very important for an operation like that. Even if the vision changes, which it obviously has and should.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I was wondering, you talked earlier, we touched on real briefly about Murder Inc. with Jordy and Paul and Chris Connolly. Can you speak a little bit to that? As far as, was it like 92 or something along those lines, right?
Well, do you know anything about it and you have a question, or you just want me to?
Here's where I'm going with it. So that's kind of, post ministry. You've worked with these guys before. You've worked with some of them before, and you're making a record. Did you have like this, when you play with someone a long time, especially, you kind of get like a sense of how they play, and you can predict what the other person is going to do. Did you feel like that was happening with that record, or is that something where you're coming at from a more academic place and trying to come something with an articulated vision beforehand?
No. So my thing. So it was on my label, so I financed it, which was really fucking stressful. I had assumed there'd be like 5 labels interested. We were playing the game a little bit back then, and nobody gave a shit. I'm like, it's Killing Joke and Ministry, and nobody gave a shit.
Like big names, like it's an interesting pairing, like yeah,
nobody gave a shit, and it wasn't. We had to do some dates. A label in England, Devotion. Music for Nations, picked it up for Europe, and booked 10 shows. And then on the back of those 10 shows, we did one show at the Limelight in New York, and amazing review in the New York Times, and got a deal out of it. But in the meantime, we'd released the album on my label. And all I was thinking about was interacting, the polyrhythmic interaction between the kids. And I wasn't worried about Raven at all, because me and Raven were just crazily rock solid. And and I knew it was just it was just really mighty, you know? And so we worked on these tracks. I think John Bechtel came in. He worked on the Killing Joke album. He also did some time in Brian Brain to do some looping, and it just felt really new and dangerous. And so we went to we rehearsed the songs and the ideas, but Chris didn't do any singing. I didn't hear the singing until like day 3 of Chris Connolly tracking vocals.
Really? Okay. Interesting. So you had the music. Okay, so you had the idea of like what the music was, but you didn't have his vocals as a reference point for a lot of that. Okay, gotcha.
And so when I heard Murder Inc., Vendetta, don't know the meaning of the word, and the word, I'm like, oh, he's fucking rapping over the top of this fucking industrial metal thing with Geordie's guitar. Like, oh my God, you know. And I had like loops and recordings from Killing Joke tours before. We were in a bar in Barcelona, and at the end of the night, the bartender presses a button on the adding machine, and it kind of goes beep, 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 like a little dot matrix printer.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, fucking do it again. Can you do that again? I had this big binaural microphone, and I recorded that, and I can hear Paul Raven on the tape goes saying "Sotto Loco," you know.
Because it's an interesting, weird rhythm. Like, it's cool. It sounds cool, yeah.
And so I'm like, you know, just like I played drums to the watch, I'm playing drums to this adding machine loop, you know. And I think sometimes me and Big Paul were like, okay, here's this like off-kilter thing. You play, let's have it go, but so you play the offs and I'll play the ons, which do you remember a band called Delta 5?
Yeah, I love the Delta 5, yeah. Brilliant band.
Okay, well, I dated half of them. So, they're Mind Your Own Business, their first hit single, the bass line was like a disco bass line.
Yeah.
But what spasticked it out and made it really interesting and angular was neither of the two bass players could play that riff. So they played da 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 ba 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 ba, and then the other ba, right between the two of them, right. So that had already, as imperfectly as it was executed, it absolutely pulled you in with its imperfections, right?
Yeah.
When the brain just hears robotics, your brain turns off. It's monotonous. So there was some like pushing and pulling and stumbling. And then Big Paul and I worked on the Notes from the Underground album with Pigface, all this overlap going on. But yeah, when Steve Albini said, you should come down and hear a couple of these songs, it was just like, oh, fuck, you know. Yeah, it's really cool as hell. And then it got interesting, you know, because then the other Murder Inc. started.
Oh, yeah. Good. Well, yeah, and that's Zeitgeist, right? Zeitgeist.
Yeah, and I forget, who was that guy?
I'd have to look at it. Let's see.
Is that Jay-Z's thing? Yeah.
Is it Jay-Z?
Wasn't it? RZA.
I mean, because it's all off of the Organized Crime Group, of course. But yeah, I'm trying to remember. Well, anyway, yeah. Point of fact.
So we did a cease and desist. This is like 3 years after the band ended, And
Right.
I did a cease and desist because I own the name, and they like offered me 10 grand. I'm like, I'd rather just tell you to like fuck off.
Yeah, it was like
The-
it was like a Def Jam sub label. Chris Gotti, founder.
Yeah.
Irv Gotti. Okay.
So I just told him to fuck off. I said, look, I'm not going to give you permission for 10 grand. I'd rather just tell you to fuck off and have you know that I never gave you permission to do that.
Well, that's gotta be gratifying too. So, walk me through your time playing music into getting into academia and getting into teaching people the way you do, sharing what you've learned, and dropping science in some cases on on folks. How did you come to do that? Because it seems like there's a pretty big gap that I'm not aware of. So
17 years ago, maybe 18 years ago, we were doing some fairly large tours, 5 bands, 3 buses, 80,000 promotional postcards with 10 different partners, 25,000 promotional CDs, working with Jägermeister, fucking pleasurable piercings, all different kinds of, merch companies, just craziness. And so I heard about the idea of interns. And I'm like, okay, we could, this would be a good place for people to come intern. They'd learn a lot. We're doing things differently. So I went up to Columbia College Chicago to get some interns, and I did a short presentation to the faculty. And they're like, fantastic, when could you start? And I said, and I said, I can put students in my car now. I mean, I can start taking them now. They're like, no, when could you start teaching this? I'm like, teaching what? What are you talking about? And they're like, you should be teaching touring, the business of touring. I'm like, and I left school when I was 16, and and in that moment, I think I had 2 kids at the time. I got 4 now. I just thought, what's the craziest thing I could do would be to say yes. And this would be like an interesting little thing.
yeah.
That I did for a month, and I thought that was an interesting opportunity. But I walked into the first class, and I'm like, okay, just ill-prepared. I had a few stories. What's the book that you're using? And they showed me a book written in 1964. And I'm like, what the book? How can you pay all this money to be taught from this book?
Yeah.
So that the rest of the class screaming at the students to pay attention to their education. And then I started to bring in materials myself, logistics, routing, settlements, and that became my first book. And I thought the book was the opportunity. And then that became like an Amazon music business bestseller.
Right.
And then I started speaking around the world, that was a thing. I did some very dry speaking. Here are my 12 slides. Now when I speak, I'll go through 160 slides in 50 minutes. I think hopefully over the last 17 years, I've become a much better speaker. I'm, on a good day, it verges on stand-up.
Right, sure. You have certain beats that you hit, and yeah, of course.
And that's enabled me to have the confidence to, instead of writing my PiL book and then going out, I wrote a frame of it, assembled some clusters of material, and then took it on the road to workshop it. And that was just incredibly valuable, to stumble into stories and let my mind do stuff like, oh, that's really good, And so over the last 17 years, I went to school, got my associate's degree in audio, my bachelor's degree in entertainment media business, and my master's in creative media. And now I write curriculum and supervise the program at Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois. And, we just, I like to make my classes real. So I have we run a record label. Every school does that now. But I had the students put a conference together, which is actually May the 9th. We've pivoted to a virtual conference with Lol Tolhurst from The Cure, Randy Blythe from Lamb of God. Galen Lee is doing a presentation on accessibility. And Wendy Day from Rap Coalition is going to talk with me. And we got like $5,000 worth of shit to give away and do that. We've added additional tour buses to my tours and taken out entire tour buses full of students with mentors and supervisors to help them, to guide them through stations of a tour, running merch, being at the sound booth, doing ticketing and VIP ticketing. Just using all of my barrier breaking to take it into the classroom and then pull the classroom out of the classroom. And so it turns out I really like teaching. And I'm lucky enough to have some people around me who help me navigate the machinery of higher education. And we're about to launch an online class in a couple of weeks, which will be informal but eventually be accredited, that will give to high school students as advanced credit. And I just carry on my punk rock tradition of doing so. So I give all of my books away. I don't think it hurts the bottom line. It just, if somebody takes one of my 600-page books and values it, then they'll come and see me speak, or they'll buy another book, or they'll pass the knowledge on or do something. So I'm enjoying applying all of that punk rock shit to education as well.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because, I mean, you literally wrote the book on touring. Like, that's a literal statement. And it's amazing to me that there are so few resources previously existing to that. And, of course, there are things that are, resources, mechanism resources, like, Book Your Own Fucking Life or something along those lines. But just talking about the ideas of it, it's fascinating to me because I feel like you almost had to have like what I used to call like a Big Brother band to kind of show you the rope. Like for me, that was Babyland, like the brilliant LA industrial group, electronic junk punk, and just be like, hey, how do you tour? Tell me how you do this, because. And now it's like, okay, I feel like it's a lot easier, and it's certainly easier to book and things along those lines. But I find it so compelling that it's a good idea just to get it all in one place and be like, look, here's a thing that, like, if this interests you, like, barrier of entry is pretty low. And most importantly, you can find out what not to do as well as what to do, which is really interesting.
But it can be really dangerous if you have a creative mind and you aspire towards a slightly complicated show. You can destroy a relationship quickly as an opening band by trying to deliver a better show rather than a quicker, more efficient show.
Right.
People just don't care. Song number 5. Did you see when I switched to the 5-string bass? No, I saw you like messed around with the chords and it cost us 3 minutes. And
yeah, I saw you waste a bunch of time. So I guess, and that's something that I think is really fascinating too. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that, like, the fact that there's a focus on things like if you're if there's a show where there's a lot of bands playing, maybe if there's 7 bands playing, everyone doesn't need to individually have their own drum kit and like tune it up and like be dicking around with it and taking their cymbals off on stage and things along those lines. That's like, oh my God, please, yes, teach this to the bands of the world. Thank you.
And it's difficult. I'm like, hey, drummer number 6. This night is not going to be saved by the tone of your snare.
Right, yeah. I mean,
people are going to leave if you start tuning your drums, and you need to be respectful. And some people get upset with me because they think the best thing they can do to honor music is to be better on their bass and give it their all. It's like, no, sometimes you just need to shut up or use somebody else's rig, but it doesn't have the tone. Yeah, it doesn't, but it's already on stage. Yeah. Fucking deal with it. But I'm, since 2016, it was interesting for me. So I came off the road and taught it while I was still on the road. And then had maybe 10 years of not being on the road while I was teaching. I was on the road as a speaker, been to Norway 5 times, Medellin, Colombia, keynoted Melbourne Music Week in Australia, done some shit. But so I was on the road, but to come back in 2016 and do one Pigface show at the House of Blues Chicago and start to experiment with advanced ticketing, VIP packages, creating value with limited edition 7-inch singles that only people with tickets get, that are advanced mailed to people, and then going to meet with Live Nation and they're like, well, why would you send 2 T-shirts and singles to people? You could save that $2,000 postage and give these packages to people day of show. I'm like, well, and it was amazing to me. I'm like, well, one, it's going to create a huge bottleneck at the door.
Yeah.
2, who's going to buy a shirt after I give them their 2 free shirts?
Right. That they're carrying around with them too. They're already carrying around merch, so why are they going to go back? Exactly.
What I want to do with this package is 12 weeks before the show, I want people to go, oh my God, here's my package. Every person got a hand-signed note, a poster they didn't know they were getting, a personalized note, and a handful of candy. And 70% of those people spread everything out on the kitchen table, took a picture and put it on social.
Yeah. Which is free advertising too, right?
It's really easy. And then we're like, wow. And then, so I thought it would be interesting to use this program. I've forgotten the name of the program. You put in zip codes on a spreadsheet, and then it puts, every zip code gets a dot on the map. So you can go, all right, be interesting. I'm sure mostly Chicago people, but when you see this map, it's like somebody shotgunned a map of the United States.
Right. Yeah. It's all over. Yeah, sure.
That becomes promotion. So I put that up, and there was 5 people from Texas. I'm like, Texas, fuck you, And somebody said, San Antonio, that's me. I am that dot,
Yeah.
And then people from Manchester and London. And so then this becomes a tool. And then I'm like, well, hold on a minute. So many people are coming in from out of town at Thanksgiving. We should do a rehearsal show. People are going to come in the day before. Let's have a rehearsal show at Reggie's Rock Club. And
Reggie's, yeah.
well, that'd be cool. And people, it was hilarious because people thought, oh, fuck. They've invited us to rehearsals. This is going to be terrible. They thought it was going to be people like, no,
Doom, 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 boop, boop, bop, bop.
G, and then down to the E for the chorus, you fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, what do you do on Thanksgiving? And I'm like, well, Reggie's has got a great kitchen with their chicken wings and their macaroni. I'm like, and so I asked Ellie, what would it take to per head to do like a Thanksgiving dinner? And she's like, well, we can't do that for free. It turned out to be like $10, $11 a head. So then because I had everybody's emails, because by buying tickets from me and sending out the packages, I'm like, hey, does anybody want to come to rehearsal? And I can't give you Thanksgiving dinner, but if you want to pay like $11, people were just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And it just started to crystallize this Pigface family,
Right.
So I'm still learning about this next part, which is kind of like back to the beginning of this for me, where I used to send Brian Brain fans postcards from England, with my PiL book, just as a surprise to anybody who pledged. Of course, that went down the toilet. But anybody who pledged, I sent everybody a handwritten postcard from Tokyo, So, it was not cheap to do that, and it took me like half a day because I've got a PiL rubber stamp, and it's just beautiful stuff. And people were just blown away. It's like, well, I don't know what it takes to blow somebody around the internet anymore, but yeah. I know you can hand sign a rubber stamped postcard and that comes from Tokyo, and and then you get into this other area, like there's a couple of hundred cars. It was somebody's birthday when they got a postcard from Tokyo from me on their fucking birthday.
Yeah.
So now you're just creating things that people will never forget, So that's what I try and teach now is how can you delight people?
Well, and I think it's also fascinating because I don't feel that there's anyone else that puts the focus on that. And, even small things like I remember I found it very admirable, the mindset of you don't really know how to be a band until you could throw an event, and like what it takes to make a good event, and all of these factors that maybe the more self-involved musician doesn't ever think about. Things like, is there going to be enough toilet paper? Is there, like just these very mundane details. And I thought that just was so brilliant because as someone that's thrown many myself, I always get so irritated at people that just don't have like that modicum of respect for those that are helping throw it. And it's between that and the, like, making it part of the adventure to make it interesting for people that want to listen to your band and participate in your band and support your band. I think it's so, God, those are so key. And there's nobody saying that.
Well, thank you. But then there's also this other thing of like, if you invest in your audience, they'll let you slide if you fuck up.
Yeah.
That's not why we do it, but it's because it's just actually delightful to like, I'm still friends with people whose floors I slept on in 1981. That all of these, that's what it is. It isn't like, oh, I'll never forget Paris. Well, I won't ever forget Paris because but it's like, so now let me tell you what I'm doing now because it's interesting.
Please, by all means, yes.
I'm doing this. You can see it.
Stay the fuck inside is what that says. Right? Yes.
So it's a bag. It's a hand screen bag, and I've signed it. So we're sending those to people with T-shirts or coffee, whatever it is, and just trying to brighten people's days a little bit. We gave 250 of those bags to Dark Matter Coffee because they've had to furlough a bunch of employees, and they have a fund. And I donated $100 to the fund, but then I gave them 250 of those bags, which they put coffee in because they got fucking coffee, right?
Okay. Right. Turns out they got the coffee, yeah.
Martin, do you have a beat? Of course I got a beat, right? So they put coffee in the bags and paired it with my get the fuck out of bed coffee. They sold over 250 of those bags at $50 a pop, right? So like, well, shit, that's $200 in an afternoon for me to give them over $14,000 worth of gross, right? So now we're starting to fuck with that. I'm doing customized T-shirts for Smalls in Hamtramck, 13th floor in Austin, Bar Sai in Tokyo, giving them these. Right, so for just a couple of $100 for me, I'm giving a venue that wants to put in drinks tickets or golden tickets or whatever into these bags the potential to raise $2,000 to $5,000 very quickly. But then I took a leaf out of Radiohead's book and I put four of these bags on my website, and they've got a really nice shirt in so you can pick the size. And those bags are 8, 18, 28, and $108. Pick a bag. And anything over the 8 goes to fuel the shirts and the bags we're sending to other businesses. Right?
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I get it.
And so then this becomes a lesson in my marketing class for students. Like, all right, I sold 140 bags in a day. What were they? And they're like, well, mostly $8 bags, of course. And then a few 18, a couple of 28s, and maybe one or two. Right? We sold 70 of the $28 bag. And we sold as many 108 as 8. Yeah. 21 of each, right? So that makes me want to cry because now this trust thing. And
you've built that trust. The people that want it, and they want, and it's the engagement is part of what they're doing with that right. transaction. Yeah.
But it's also this other thing. Maybe the trust exists or it doesn't, but it exists more once you challenge it. Do you know what I mean? Once you go, all right, where is your trust? Once people make a decision, they have decided that, right? And now we have a different relationship. So that I didn't start teaching because I feel like I can tell people stuff. I'm teaching because I'm still gleefully excited to learn.
Which is, I mean, I think that definitely shows with your personality and how you approach things. And it's something that I think it's actually very brave to come at it from that perspective. And I think a lot of times when people put themselves off in a way where they are not eager to learn, you know, they want to look like the ultimate authority or something, it just makes them look insecure, frankly.
And that's a path to disaster, because I tell musicians, and so this is true for educators, if you're all about your bass guitar, you're all about lead guitar, and you're practicing 5 hours a day and wondering what would happen if you practice 6 hours a day, I'm like, there's a 5-year-old kid in China who's already better than your level.
Yeah, of course. Right. Yeah, totally. You can look them up on YouTube. Yeah.
and the same is true for anything you think you're an expert at. Somebody else is like doing this amazing thing over here.
Yeah.
So it's much better to be like, fucking hell, Nipsey Hussle, the $100 mixtape, the $1,000 mixtape, and rest in peace, Nipsey. But like, there's so many amazing ideas that to understand them and perpetuate them and regurgitate them is what I want to be doing, you know.
Well, and I feel like you use your platform in a productive way too, in a way that adds rather than subtracts. And I'm thinking about just like real simple things, like, you know, on Twitter, just that, you know, get the fuck out of bed. Like something as simple as that. And it's, you know, at first I was like, oh, is this shtick? I was like, no, actually, this is smart, because if you think about it, you know, Christ, especially right now, you know, people need to have some kind of positive engagement. This isn't necessarily someone trying to get something out of them. It's just like, it's
right.
Affirmation of a sort, but it's also a boot in the ass.
Right. Well, and so I've been doing that for 10 years. And that started because I didn't want to be the kind of dad. I have 4 boys. I didn't want to be the kind of dad who every morning was like, get up, time to get up.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
So I put it into one of my lectures. I started tweeting, and then I had somebody do a design like that, keep calm, carry on design.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's a logo kind of thing to it, yeah.
And then I've got a picture of me in Madison at a UX, Madison Ruby programming conference. And this get the fuck out of bed slide is like, it's like 20 feet high, and I'm standing in front of it.
Right, yeah.
And so I had posters made, and then I would say to my kids, I'm like, listen, look, this isn't me being that kind of a dad. This is actually part of my lecture. That, like,
yeah, this is yeah, this applies to people that aren't you too.
but so and then that turned into a really successful brand of coffee, you know, which then introduced me to Dark Matter Coffee, which once again, still learning. I went for a meeting with Dark Matter 3 years ago, and I remember thinking, okay, I guess we'll talk coffee, and we might taste coffee. And I just mapped out the meeting in my head. And I sat down. It's the first meeting I think I've ever been to empty-handed. Normally I've got like, oh, here's a piece of the ministry page. You want a t-shirt? It's my book.
Right. Yeah. But you don't even know what you're going to be walking into in this case. It's not your world necessarily, yeah.
And instead, Jesse and Kyle sit me down. They're like, here's this double vinyl we did with Derek Carter 7-inch. Here's a cassette tape. Here's a beer we did in conjunction with Mastodon. I'm like, this is where record labels went. The energy went to these other places. And I just started a love affair with that coffee company. You know, it's just fucking brilliant.
So, and I feel like there's a lot of people, believe it or not, a lot of people that listen to this show are people that are musicians themselves. They play in bands. And one of the things that I find is they get a lot out of these conversations, getting context, even for things as simple as how people keep certain bands and projects sustainable, what kind of day jobs do they have, things along those lines. Without giving away the store necessarily with stuff in the book, what would you say, what's your greatest epiphany or shared wisdom that you could give to like working bands, like smaller bands? What should they be focusing on? What should they ignore? What are they doing wrong?
Right. Well, so actually speaking about like not giving away the store, anybody who goes to martinatkins.com, this site is under construction, but there's a form. Just put in your name, email, and zip code, and you can get BandSmart, which has only been out for about a year, 650 pages of really good stuff, right? So anybody who's in a band who doesn't take advantage of that free download, like just what do you
yeah, what are you, busy? Come on. Really?
but so his interesting stuff, and you know, I'm 60, so I've seen a bunch of this stuff. Kimberly Freeman has something called One-Eyed Doll, and she was living in a container when I met her, which is like hip LA detective scenario now.
Right, yeah. Like a shipping container you're talking about, like one of the ones that are on the boats and stuff like that. Okay, all right, yeah.
So she neither had money to make merch, nor did her fans have any money to buy merch. So she would go and buy shirts for 30 and 40 cents at the thrift store, turn them inside out, and write One-Eyed Doll with a Q-tip dipped in bleach. And I was like, oh, fuck, well, this is disastrous, you know. And she's like, how much are you selling these for? She's like, $3, $4. You know, she's like quadrupling her money in her. She's like, fuck yeah. And I'm like, oh, Christ. But she's like, look, none of my fans are homeless anyway. Yeah. I'm like, okay. But then, so hanging out with Kimberly for years and years. So now, those shirts that she turned inside out, they're now collector's items.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
People get all snooty about like what was the original shirt, and like some of them are worth more than others, and you know, it just made me realize that artists try and perfect something. And so I passed this on to another artist recently, like the bleaching technique, and you can use stencils and you can start to splatter things and really get creative with it. And this guy starts sending me pictures of like, here's the last 8 I've done. I think I'm really getting there. I'm perfecting this technique. I'm like, look, you're never going to have a bleach stencil shirt look like it was made at a professional place.
Right, the imperfection's part of the charm, really.
And actually, you've made this really uninteresting and crap, you know. But when you're actually doing it, there's no such thing as a mistake. When you're doing it, it's like if you go to Urban Outfitters and buy a PiL shirt, which you can do, and there's a thumbprint on it, you'd be outraged and take it back. If you get one of Kimberly Freeman's shirts with the Q-tip dipped in bleach and there's a footprint and a cigarette burn, it's like, oh,
yeah.
She trod in bleach. She trod on the shirt while she was smoking. Oh my God. You know, it's like, it's really strange. There's no such thing as a mistake when you're authentic and you're doing something. So my advice to artists is, don't perfect your shit to present it to an audience, because unless you're presenting it as you go, you're not allowing the audience to be part of the process and help you perfect this. I'm not saying you need to let the audience dictate your direction, but in the height of the Marx Brothers, they would do 4 shows a day. They would do 28 shows in a week. And Groucho Marx would say the iterations that a sketch would go through in a week, 28 iterations. How long does it take your band to do 28 shows, right? Do you just, you know, once again, I'm not saying let the audience dictate where you're going, but use that feedback loop. That's why people are liking Patreon, is instead of completing an album, and sometimes an album never gets finished, right? The task becomes insurmountable. It just becomes too big to finish. But when it's just a song every month, you can be panicked, you can be slightly ill one month, if something's happened, your fucking car crashed, somebody stole your guitar, thank goodness, you know, and you're forced to improvise, and people are like, whoa, I fucking love the xylophone. Where's this xylophone been? Suddenly, your out of tune vocals sound brilliant, right? It's like you just do stuff. And this constant feedback loop of a Patreon, a monthly Patreon, people are finding that really liberating. So let go of your shit. Let go of technical ability. That's punk. Here's a chord. Here's another. Here's a third. Start a band. That's punk. Just start doing it and let the doing inform. And don't be afraid to do a potato print bleach T-shirt.
Right,
which,
right.
you know, it doesn't. If you're pretending to be Duran Duran, of course you can't. Like, hey, greetings from Monte Carlo. Here's our potato bleach.
Yeah, that'd be a bit ill-fitting. Yeah.
So don't be a Duran Duran twat. Be yourself. Be whoever you are, and be that. Because, you know, when people forgive mistakes in a song, it's because they like you. So if people like you, be more that person and find out where that person is going. That's my advice. All that kind of shit is in Bandsmart.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it's you're doubling down on the case for folks to go download that book, because I think that's all very brilliant and succinctly put advice that I think is very valuable for folks. Martin, it's been a pleasure. Last thing, I have one can question that I ever ask people, and it's always at the end. It's pretty easy, but you can get some interesting stuff out of it, and that's just, why do you do what you do?
Well, so there's a couple of parts to my answer.
By all means, please.
So what I was as a up until 28 years old, I guess, was a drummer. If you said, what do you do? I'm a drummer. I've got my sticks. Let's go. You know. Then I was a label owner and a studio cat and a teacher and an author and a dad, husband. I built a few studios as well. I've challenged myself with that stuff. So I guess I try and stay busy and challenged. And it delights me to be surprised by stuff. It would be easy to say, oh, I'm doing these screen printing bags to help. I'm just trying to help people. But the truth is, I'm loving the equations of help, like how much it doesn't take me much work. It takes me some imagination and some ideas to help somebody materially get through a shit week. And I think then that delights me that I'm teaching music business, but I'm really teaching brain stretching and pivoting and creativity and showing people the value of these solutions. Somebody at Cisco said a creative problem-solving mindset is the new job security. And that has never been more true. So that learning, one of the reasons I'm so delighted when I learn something is like, oh, this is going to make a fucking great class that will surprise the students. So that's why I do what I do. I'm just trying to be a kid in a sandpit and get that flow and lose myself in that creativity in those moments and then pass it along.
Well, that's brilliant. And I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for spending it with me.
Hey, thanks. It was nice to talk to you.
And yeah, for folks that just martinatkins.com, go get the book. And anything else that people should be aware of?
They can go and check out these bags at Martin Atkins Big Cartel. That's kind of fun. I'll send you a link to our conference on the 9th.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. I actually signed up for that. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And that's going to be fun. Lol is giving away some books. We're going to give away some decent stuff during that, which is helpful to any of the artists who are listening. I'm also going to be doing some kind of hour-long Zoom chats with anybody who wants to jump on and ask me questions, like career advice stuff and strategy stuff. I'm really good at tour logistics. I can save a mid-level tour $10,000 in 40 minutes. So I'll be throwing some of that stuff up as well.
Brilliant. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's been lovely. Thank you so much. And
Thanks.
Yeah, stay safe.
See ya.
All right, brother.
Bye.
Oh, there he is, Mr. Martin Atkins. We are out. We are out of here. This is the end. Martin Atkins. Stay tuned, live listeners. Stay tuned. We've got a PiL special coming on Radio Nope for those listening at RadioNope.com. That was Mr. Martin Atkins. What a cool guy.
Can you hear me now?
I feel all self-conscious. There's nothing for the people on the Instagram live to look at. What a time to be alive. Oh, there he goes. Indeed, Brian Musikoff. Indeed. Musicon with Musikoff. PiL special coming up in 5 minutes here.
Is this thing on?
The name of this show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. It airs on RadioNope.com.
Can you hear me now?
Usually Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific.
As we come to the close of our broadcast day.
These days, a lot of the time. RadioNeutron.com for the archives.
Farewell transmission.
Patreon.com/Protonic Reversal to get the episodes sooner. $1 a month will get you there.
Signing off.
No ads, no sponsors. No kidding.
Mr. and Mrs. America, and all the ships at sea. Anyone within the sound of my voice.
Thanks everyone for helping out the show and spreading the word about these episodes, and it's been really overwhelming and cool to be part of the ecosystem. So
I've got
thanks.
50,000 watts of power.
Shows on YouTube, if that's listening to podcasts on YouTube is something that you want to do.
I want to ionize the air.
Anything else? Bunch of episodes coming up next week. Yeah,
This
stay tuned.
microphone turns sound into electricity.
Stay safe out there.
Can you
As
hear me
always.
now?
Take it easy.
Out on Route 128, dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio as we come to the close of our broadcast day. Radio. Can you hear me now? This is a real goddamn emergency!